Hello, everyone. Thank you for broadcasting us today on the 31st panel discussion on the South Sudanese Intellectual Women Forum. Our topic today is an informative one, like many ones we've seen before. Today's topic is one that is underrated, overrated, and underestimated. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's topic, which would be about the future of urban planning, development, and the built environment in South Sudan. Today we have a panel that is within a broad range of professionals within this field. I'd like by starting to introducing myself. I am Josephine Hakim. I'll be your host for this topic today. By profession, I've been practicing architecture for the past 4 years since my first degree at Birmingham City University in the UK. I've been working within several architectural practices here in the UK, starting from large to medium. I've been involved in projects ranging from residential, community infrastructures, commercial, and urban like master planning. I am currently part-time working as an architectural practice in London while undertaking my final qualification to be registered under the Royal Institute of British Architects, and also completing my final year of Masters of Architecture at Kingston University, London. Furthermore, I promote humanitarian architecture, community development, and currently I'm assisting in designing and a construction of a primary school in Zambia with a team of NGO this coming summer. I'm also co-founder of an emerging platform, Building for Tomorrow, which is a non-profit collaborative platform that seeks on developing communities through the elevation of younger generation, through the promotion of the world of construction and the built environment. With that being said, I'd like to introduce a brief introduction about our topic today. Over time, there's been an increase in socio-economic growth that has improved urbanization and suburbanization on one hand. On the other hand, it has placed a large burden on resources used and its sustainability over time. Urban planning, also known as city planning, town planning, and its regulations has a profound responsibility within a town or a city's social equity, economic, aesthetic appeal, and environmental growth. Urban planning and its regulation through implemented policies within the built environment also aid in managing public health, bettering the infrastructure, and improve the quality of urban life. Sustainably built environments are fairly important to the urban growth, dealing especially with environmental issues, housing issues, and community well-being. In current time, most cities or towns, developments within urban planning has come to a turning point, with issues arising such as rapid population growth, traffic, and lack of resources, putting serious concerns both environmentally and on people's well-being within urban cities. And therefore, it is important that urban planning policies and planners find efficient and smart solutions to create sustainable cities that can cope with the demands of the process of urbanization. Furthermore, sustainably built cities factors advances of smart planning strategies such as green transport, smart metering, and e-government to prevent urban collapse. The urban structure sustainably affects a building's performance from its access to sunlight, ventilation, and noise levels. Therefore, the implementation of governed urban plannings, regulation, and policies ensure efficient urban development and growth within a town. With that being said, thank you, and I would like to introduce my panel today that would would give us a light into this topic today. starting by engineer Mariam. She's a chemical and a process engineer. She is also a policy expert with over 6 years of related work experience, both in private and non-profit sectors. She's also accredited in a LEED Green Associate with the US Green Building Council. She's also a member of the Young African Leader Institute. Mariam also holds an MA in Global Environmental Policy from the American University in the US, a master's in environmental and energy engineering from University of Sheffield in the UK. She's currently working for Africa Center for the Strategic Process in Washington, DC. She explores ways of promoting responsible ways of energy, natural resources, and the environment. Thank you, Mariam, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. My second panelist I would like to introduce is Abolo Irene. She's a chemical, energy, and environmental engineer. She's obtained her qualifications from the University Technology Patrons in Malaysia and also the University of Blingsford in Germany. She previously worked as a process engineer for SIPED and a consulting process engineer for GPOC. She also worked as a researcher at Blingsford University in Germany and also as a technical coordinator. Currently, she's working as a director for the Eastern Energy, a South Sudanese renewable energy company. She's also pursuing her second degree in wind engineering at the Blingsford University of Applied Science. Thank you and welcome here today.
Thank you, Josephine, for having me.
No problem. My third panelist is Labina. Labina is a civil, water, and sanitization specialist with a Master's of Science in Water and Sanitation from the University of Leeds in the UK. She's currently a WASH program coordinator, Rural Water and Sanitation Support Agency. She also serves as a BOD of the Rural Finance Initiative, providing South Sudanese communities and Ugandan refugees with financial services. Labina aspires to use her career to positively contribute in addressing complex social and global challenges. Welcome, Labina.
Thank you for having me.
My fourth panelist is Abija Sarah. She's an electric engineer. She holds an MA in human rights and local governance. She's a passionate women rights activist who has served in humanitarian aid work with several NGOs that includes MSF, American Refugee Community, African Development and Emergency Organization. She currently serves as an exclusive director, Women Partnership of Health. Sarah also is a part of the South Sudanese Women Advocacy Forum, such as C Corps, WMF, SSWC, and the CSF's National Alliance on the Security Sector Reforms. Welcome, Abija. I would like to also introduce Ayaba, she's a civil engineer and an architect. She specializes in highway, airport, geotechnical, renewable energy, water sanitization, and hygiene. She has a vast experience in designing infrastructure and planning. She worked in project management, consultancy in an oil company in South Sudan. She encourages and mentors young women in her community to do engineering. Welcome, Ayaba.
Thank you, Josephine, for having me.
With that, moving forward, today's topic is an interesting one. And I'd like to start by asking my panelists through Mariam to just briefly explain to us how you got into your career and why. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Growing up, I've always been interested in problem solving. I used to like solving puzzles on the newspaper. And then later on in my high school, I liked sciences, so chemistry, biology, physics. And I was always curious on how to get raw materials to finished products. And after much research, I realized that chemical engineering is whereby you'll be able to work in a process or in a manufacturing industry. And that is really how I chose to do chemical engineering. Thank you.
That's great, Mariam. Just curious, while growing up, were there people that you inspired around you that led you into that career?
Yes, I had my dad's friends who did chemical engineering, and he played a big role in advising me on, because initially I had to choose between the different types of engineering, and he's the one who really helped me narrow down to chemical engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. I'd like to ask Engineer Ayaba, can you shed a light to us into how you got into this career and why?
Yeah, first of all, civil engineering is a very interesting field. It has a lot of things to do with creativity. So as I was growing up, I grew up in a camp, refugee camp in Uganda. So I was living with my grandmother. There was a time whereby it was raining and it was all along the house, the grass house. It was leaking. So when it was leaking in the morning, I woke up, I was like, why is this water here? They're like, because the roof was not okay. So I was asking, how can this roof be fixed? Can I just go up there and fix? My father was like, okay, you can fix it. So we went together with him. We climbed to the roof, and then we tried to fix it up. Again, when I was going out, just outside the road, I found out that there's a lot of water pond which have gathered around the gate. So I again asked the question. He told me, I asked him, who is responsible in doing all this work? He told me, those are engineers. I was like, okay, I want to be that person. And that's how engineering started coming in my head. And thank God, when I joined high school, I came to love mathematics a lot and physics. And that's how I ended up in civil engineering. Thank you.
That's great and is extremely inspiring, because growing up, deciding to be an architect, it was almost a storyline through a movie that I've watched. I've never seen an architect in my life. I've never met an architect in my life. But for some reason, the architect was a lady, and that lady was respected, and was, for some reason, she felt like she could control her environment. And with that, she's inspired me to be who I am today. Sadly, she's not South Sudanese, but I would love to see more of such women. I would like to ask the same questions to Engineer Labina. Help us understand how you got into civil engineering and what has inspired you growing up.
Just like Engineer Aiba has mentioned, civil engineering is a creative field. And growing up, I'm more of a creative person. I like designing things, art, and also in fashion and style. But also I had someone, my dad, who was a civil engineer and working in the water and sanitation field. So he was my first inspiration. Initially, I wanted to actually do nursing or into the medical field, but then seeing him and seeing the work he was doing in South Sudan in the water and sanitation sector inspired me to pursue civil engineering, in which water and sanitation is one of the sub-disciplines that that is in the civil engineering discipline. So that's why I pursued civil engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that story. I would like to get back to our discussion of the topic, and I want to ask Engineer Mariam to enlighten us more about urban planning by defining what is urban planning and what are the most important factors to consider when developing an urban planning city.
Thank you, Josephine. I will first briefly describe urbanization, which is the increase in the number of population in an urban area, leading to growth of structures, development, and urbanization results to what is defined as urban heat island effect, which is when a city experiences much warmer temperatures than nearby rural areas due to surfaces that absorb and hold heat. On the other hand, climate change, which is change in global and regional climate patterns, acts as a threat multiplier, meaning that in hot areas like in South Sudan, the urban heat island effect is increased as a result of climate change effects. Therefore, in some countries, government agencies have had to implement heat-resilient urban planning policies. So urban planning is basically deciding how you want your city or town to develop and how it should grow. And this could be in terms of establishing cooling centers where people could rest in, green roofs, or greening spaces by planting trees and so on and so forth. So regarding how climate change affects development in South Sudan, looking at Juba in recent years, there has been an influx of migrants from the neighboring countries coming to seek employment, and also others coming in from rural areas. Rapid urbanization combined with the current political instability and the under-resourcing has led to poor urban infrastructure and city planning, especially in Juba. And this is a big problem. Because according to an organization called Climate Links, since 1980, there has been a decrease in rainfall by 10 to 20%. And this has been accompanied by rapid increase in temperature. And it has been found that this warming in South Sudan especially is 2.5 times greater than the global average, making every year effectively drier than the previous one. And I would also like to point out that according to the Climate Change Vulnerability Index, South Sudan is ranked among the 5 worst performing in the world. So we are at a place whereby we can't cope with adverse effects of climate change, including climate variability and extremes. And we have already seen the climate variability, such as widespread and localized droughts and floods across the country recently. And to counter that, the government has ratified the Framework Convention on Climate Change and drafted a National Adaptation Plan of Action. But moving forward, we now have to look at implementation because there's a significant gap in South Sudan's climate change policy in that it does not outline how the urban built environment should be planned to mitigate the detrimental heat effect on human health. And Juba's average temperature is roughly between 26 to 32, I would say. And there's no data regarding the heat-related illnesses in South Sudan, but evidence from other countries in Africa shows that increased mortality happens with increasing temperature, especially above 31 degrees for children under 5, and even for adults. So as a policy expert, my opinion is this: to combat climate risks, urban planning must increasingly be driven by human health and well-being. We have to tie the two together. Because of the complexity of the effects of climate change and urbanization, there's a strong need to cooperate between different administrative levels, such as regional or local levels within the country, as well as cooperation between different organizations like the government and the private sectors and the NGOs. And finally, cooperation among disciplines. So linking land, water, housing, energy, industry, and transport management. The urban design should first aim at preventing natural hazards, then at mitigating the impact, followed by adaptation, and then coping with the uncertainty so as to build urban resilience. In conclusion, long-term sustainable urban planning is needed in South Sudan. and can be based on the following measures. So number one, we need to identify climate-proof areas or alternative sites that are more suitable for urban development. So what are the areas that are flood prone? We need to avoid that. And locate areas in towns with maximum wind exposure to help with the cooling effects. We have to control the type of land use and development in urban areas. We have to install land use regulations and building codes. We also have to relocate urban population vulnerable to climate change. I saw on the news how there was flooding in some areas and people were rendered homeless. So we need to identify such areas. We also have to renovate our urban energy and transportation systems, as well as construction of climate-proof infrastructure. This includes like river dams or dikes to prevent floods from the low-lying areas. And finally, we need to develop heat warning systems. In the US, whenever there's an adverse weather coming up, we get like text messages telling us, don't go outside or, be mindful. But in South Sudan, we could start with simple alternatives like use the internet or the radio for public awareness and to inform people on what should they do during a heat wave and what facilities to use. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that information. And it is a big factor that there need to be an interrelation between different sectors linked with government policies. With that being said, I would like to ask Engineer Ayaba about, are there any existing government regulation and policies in South Sudan that promote this sort of sustainable urban development?
None have been passed to the law so far. However, there are environmental policies and proposals that have been developed with assistance from various organizations by various government institutions that promote and encourages sustainable urban development. And in that case, for the future plan, there must be the policies which have already been set or the proposal, it has to be passed into the law so that it can be enforced. Without being passing, it just remains a proposal. However, the government has well laid down policies and regulations put in a place for all the development and planning. And that's why we are seeing the road today. If you can just check on Juba City, Juba City is where its road is really well demarcated and you cut across even Yei. And some have not visited the western part of South Sudan, but you can see that they have good planning in place. The road's capacity is good, meaning that they have thought about the future. And just why they have given that. And to do more of thinking of that urban planning, it seems like it has not been incorporated into the system. So for this matter, I will not wish to explore much on it since there are relevant departments and authorities that has handled such queries to detail on requests. Like, for example, we have the Department for Infrastructures. There are some people who may be having the plan or the way out to enforce these policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's quite informative how we possibly need to have more regulation implemented to guide this sustainable or urban development. And my next question would probably highlight that more. And I'd like to ask Engineer Labina, and the question is, what urban planning attempts have been made in the past, if so, and what progress so far in the future that could be done on it within the framework of South Sudan?
Thank you for that question. Well, when it comes to urban planning, I will perhaps take us back, way back before we attained independence, the time we're under one Sudan. I think it was in the 1970s. I was not there, but inquiries into planning have been made aware that the 3 cities in South Sudan, the 3 regional cities, that is to say Juba for Greater Equatoria, Wau for Greater Baragazal, Malakal for Greater Upper Nile, were actually planned. And the plans took into consideration land use planning. They planned for residential areas and also recreational areas. And it's quite evident, taking Juba for example, if you look at the area view of Juba, you can clearly see that the settlement structures are quite organized, and the road infrastructure, the roads themselves are clearly demarcated. And if you're on the ground itself, it might be a little bit different because the structures are not what we expect to see, and also the roads are not worked on and made to standard. But you can clearly see that there is some sort of planning that was done. Yeah. And then when it comes to the recreational areas, for now we have open spaces like the football fields, but then some of the other recreational areas are made to understand that they were allocated as plots to individuals. And so there was an alteration of plans in the process. When it came to around 2007, there was a request from the government of Sudan to conduct a study on the physical setup of Juba, and JICA was assigned this task. So they conducted an emergency study on planning and support for basic physical and social infrastructure in Juba town and its surrounding areas. And one of the objectives was to formulate a development plan for Juba from 2015 to 2025. Yeah, the infrastructure development plan looked at 9 project components. One, they looked at road transport, and in that they were supposed to rehabilitate roads. They were supposed to construct highways, interchanges for buses and trucks. They were supposed to construct class A, B, C roads, and so on. 2, when it came to river transport, they were supposed to expand the port pier to about 70 meters. They were supposed to also construct a new port. And then air transport, they were to expand the runway and also construct a new airport. And 4, when it comes to water supply, Juba was supposed to be served with 100% piped water. So they were to construct piped water systems with their treatment plants. And then power supply, they were to construct new hydroelectric power plant, and then also develop sanitary landfill site for solid waste management, and also put up sewerage systems with the treatment facilities, and also public toilets when it comes to wastewater management. They were also supposed to put up educational facilities and health facilities. Then that plan was done, but the study was done, but then it seems like it did not go so much forward. Then in 2010, just a year before independence, the government of South Sudan again requested JICA to do another study. So JICA carried out the Juba urban transport infrastructure and capacity development study. They were building on the study they had done previously in 2007. This plan formulated the Juba Urban Transport and Development Master Plan. It had clear vision, it had clear policies, strategies, and institutional framework for road development, for public transport, for traffic management, issues to do with environment and social development, and also human resource development. In that plan, they proposed a land use plan that would place Juba as a transport hub of the region with multiple lanes for buses, on-street parking, bike lanes, private vehicle lanes, traffic signs, markings, street lighting, green and recreational areas, all these to make Juba comfortable, pleasant, and environmentally friendly. And then around 2010, 2011, there was this concept plan that was made for the 10 states of South Sudan. The plan was to have the different states in the shapes of animals. I think it circulated around on social media, and I think most people got to see it. But I think they did not buy the idea. But I think if it was bought, I think it would have been a very beautiful idea. And when implemented, it would be really, really attractive to so many people. It would improve the aesthetic appearance of the country. Then also in the past, the Ministry of Roads, Housing and Urban Development, they developed some planning policies that up to now, actually, I think they are still in draft format. They were not shared by stakeholders, and they were not passed by Parliament. And I'm also made aware that right now, they are drafting a concept note for Juba Metropolitan Plan. So looking at all these plans that have been done in the past, where are we presently? To be honest, I think there is little progress that has been made. For example, water supply, which was supposed to have Juba served with 100% piped water. Currently, we are still tracking water, actually. It's very disturbing to know that 10 years down the line since we became independent, we are still tracking water to citizens. A plan that was temporary, that was meant to cater for the returnees that were coming back into the country, has now been normalized. It's now normal for us. And I think recently, about 3 weeks ago, there was shortage of water. Water trackers were on strike because of the economic hardships, and people were going without water. So this is a really big issue that needs addressing. In terms of progress that has been made in other sectors, river transport, yes, the pier was extended, and actually a new port facility with handling facilities was constructed. It's operational, but what I don't know is whether maintenance is being done. When it comes to air transport, only the runway, and if everybody can see, only the runway has been extended, but we don't have a new airport. We are still struggling with this old airport, which doesn't have most of the facilities. And so we need to, in future, we need to really plan strategically and have a good airport that is appealing to each and everybody. When it comes to road transport, very little has been done because the same road networks that existed before are still the same road networks that we still see today. The only difference is, yes, they're trying to do some tarmacking for some roads, but many road networks remain untarmacked. They are still in the same state, and they continue to deteriorate with the climate change effects. And so we need to do a lot to avert such challenges. Also in road transport, perhaps the only thing, okay, that has been done following the plans has been the building of the Freedom Bridge. It's still delayed for now because of COVID-19, but I think JICA will carry on the plan of finishing it after perhaps next year or so. So we have really done very, very little progress, and most of the progress actually has not followed the plans that were made in the past. We are doing things following a whole different plan, you know. For example, when you look at the road sector still, the design of the roads are not following the designs and the standards that were actually used in planning. You look at a road like the one coming from St. Kizito going down to Suklibia. After people built their shops, their houses, they're now only coming in to do the sidewalks, you know, and these sidewalks are not being done according to the design. The design says they are supposed to be around 2.5 to 3 meters wide, but right now when you see, it's like 1 meter wide. So that tells us that people are doing things on a whole different plan, not following the actual plans that were made in the past. So looking at the plans in the past and the progress we are on, it's the future actually looks worrisome, you know. It's dim, you know. For us to see the future we want to see, we have to do things right, okay, and we have to start doing them now. But if we are not doing nothing right now, that means there is nothing to look forward to in the future. So we have to take concrete steps to address the challenges impeding the execution of these plans. We have to go back to the plans, revise them, make adjustments, and because, of course, the context has changed. So we have to go back to the plans, revise them, make alteration, and follow them through to ensure that we are able to put in place all the things that we had planned before. So I think that's where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important enlightenment. And this definitely seemed to be a way that this country is trying to move forward, yet there seems to be a lack of implementation of these regulations that would uphold the almost sustainability of it. And with that being said, it's important to say that a city almost has to function in a particular way in order to achieve its maximum efforts. And with that, I would like to ask Engineer Abolo, what is a smart city and how can we make a city smart?
All right, thank you for that question, Sarah. So a smart city is an Internet of Things. To a layman, a smart city is a watched city. But in simple terms, a smart city is a city that uses technology to solve its problems. Now, when you talk about smart city, it's hard to describe exactly what it is because it depends or it differs from one community to another or from one city to another. But there are components to it and attributes to it and also themes and infrastructure to it that make every different city smart in their own way. Now, when you talk about smart city, you have to look at what are the components. And then under the components, it could be transport. And I'm glad Engineer Labina already spoke about roads and other means of transportation here. So that's one important aspect of a smart city. And you talk about health services or health centers, you talk about governance, but most importantly, now you may ask, what a smart city? So how a smart city functions, you have different sensors. For example, you may have traffic lights with sensors and cameras, and then they are all connected to a central database system. So there is a person or a group of individuals who are responsible in managing of this data. It could be worrisome as well, because if that data falls into wrong hands, it could be a problem. But if you look at how you want to solve problems of your city, I think a smart city is a good way of looking at things. And first of all, we need to determine what are our community needs, because our community needs will drive what kind of smart city we would like to build. So that goes back into our built environment. What do we want our city to look like? And then it will look at society. Under society, South Sudanese society, what are our needs? If you look at Juba, what are our us into the design of our smart city? And then secondly, also, we should identify different business models. How do we interlink our components? Let's say transport, how do we link it to the society? Because you find people when they migrate from the village to the urban areas, there's a bit of shock. So how do we incorporate that element of shock into that city that we are building in order to save our citizens from causing crimes that they are not, they don't mean to cause, but it happens and they are unaware of it, but yeah. And then if you look at our health system, how do we get the quickest response to, or the quickest access to our health systems? So we do need a platform where, citizens can get quick and easy and efficient access to health services. Our transportation system needs improvement. Also, if you look at our governance, how do we help the government help us in a way, because they can't watch everything that's happening in the city. If you have a police, you have to call them and then they have to rush. But if you have a system where you can see, or they can easily see where something is going wrong, or if something in the neighborhood happens, there are cameras or there are sensors around, so they can locate immediately and quickly and then respond faster. So important aspects of a smart city, the components, very important. And then we also have the attributes. What are the attributes of a smart city? Sustainability, quality of life, as well as smartness in terms of, if you look at waste management, which I'm glad my colleague Miriam already spoke about climate change related issues. So waste management is a big problem currently in Juba. I haven't been to all other areas of South Sudan, so I can't speak for them, but I've seen that in Juba. So incorporate waste management into this database where we can manage things efficiently, but most importantly, make our cities smart and make life easy for our residents and citizens. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. That would bring me to
welcome.
Abija Sarah, which she's an electric engineer. Just help us shed light into what technical consideration in urban planning and the built environment that you would have to undertake within your framework of work. You're muted, Sarah?
Josephine, I think you're muted.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just want to give. I think I'm muted. Hi. Hi.
We can hear you. We can hear you, Sarah.
I have unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Sure. To
Yes,
me, the technical considerations that we need to include in urban planning, first and foremost, we have to look at the security and the safety of the human beings. So when you are considering urban planning, most importantly, we have to look at the safety and the security. And when we look at the issues of safety, we look at how the human being plus the property and everything around the city are protected. And then looking at security, especially, we look at how have we planned in case of a disaster. How have we planned in case we have both man-made disaster or natural disasters? So those are some of the things that we have to look at. And then looking at the security, how safe are the people living in the city? For instance, if I have to move as a woman, if I'm to move from my house to my workplace, and then from my workplace to pick the child from school, and then drop the child, and then come back. And then as women, most of us are in informal sectors, how safe I am if I'm sailing along the road. So those are the aspects that we need to look at when we are planning the technical aspects when we are planning our urban cities, urban areas, or the original cause for urban planning is the aesthetics. Aesthetics, these are just looking at the appearance of the city. How beautiful is it? What is the common identification of that city? How is the arrangement of the construction in the city? So basically, originally, urban planning was looking at the aesthetics, but beyond the beauty of the city, we came in the issues of safety and security. The other technical aspect is the transport and communication. If I am to move from Juba to Gudele, should I have to pass via Munuki and then Miosaba and then go to Gudele? Or what is available? Which kind of transport is available for me to reach direct to mitigate the wastage of energy that is used to transport me from one distance? Important technical aspects to be considered in urban planning. The other aspect is the environmental protection. We have talked about clean, green cities and all that. So when we are doing our urban planning, it is very important to look at the environmental protection. For instance, I'm sure for those who have been in Juba, you must have mourned for our beautiful trees that were cut off during the installation of electric system in the city of Juba in South Sudan. I one time had a talk show, and I brought this up. I complained. I was like, why would we cut the trees for us to have electricity? The trees which are already existent, couldn't we navigate through these trees for us to have electricity? If the tree was to grow before the electric poles, why would we really have to cut off these trees? We can navigate this. The planners are very rigid in such a way that they don't want to be innovative. So because the pole is passing here, it should pass here, let's cut the tree. So these are the issues that we have to look at when we are looking at environmental protection. The other thing is also planning for space and community facilities. When we are doing our planning, we shouldn't just look at okay, let's have a business center, let's have this. why wouldn't we look at other facilities that are very important? If we realize that most people are living in Gudele, why wouldn't we plan for space for schools in Gudele? Other than all of us are moving with our children to come to the schools that are in the middle of the town. So those are the technical aspects that we need to include when we are planning our cities. The other thing that is coming up and which is very important, especially for us women who may not be able to afford very expensive housing, is the availability or planning for affordable housing which have basic infrastructure. There's need for zoning in such a way that we have to accept the fact that not everybody can be living in a VIP or class 1 area. And not everybody is able to buy a whole big plot to have a home. We could plan for places where we have apartments, and those apartments can be for single families or families that are beginning and are preparing to have a bigger family in future. So those are some of the things that we can plan for in Juba. Actually, I'm quite happy that Juba is a city that is coming up after we have known all this. Hopefully, if we do not have influence from the politicians and the failure to implement the policies, we would have a very smart city which is well planned. The other thing that we consider when we are planning for when we are doing our urban planning, technically we have to look at the original sites. Because now we have all the money and we are beginning to plan the Juba city, we should destroy the old sites. No, we have to keep those heritage for our identity, for history, for to leave a legacy behind that people will know that, okay, the old Juba used to have ABCD. Maybe looking at, for instance, we used to have, although I didn't see it, we used to have South Sudan hotel that was demolished completely, and now I see just near the Muduria, there used to be a hotel there. There was no need to destroy that hotel, and even up to now it's not yet built. We should have left it there. As old as it is, it should have been our old heritage. But those are some of the things that our planners did not take into consideration. But technically, we are supposed to leave our old heritage in place for history, for of that sort.
Hi, Sarah.
The
I'm
other
sorry
thing
to cut you.
that we need to look at, planning for industrial development. We know basically urbanization comes. Hello?
Hi. Is there a way you could try and tone the background noise slightly? There's a background noise behind.
Okay, let me try to close the door.
I think we can hear you now. While we wait for Sarah, she said important things whereby we need to strategize planning according to zoning so that a specific area would have much resources, then we wouldn't have to congest in one area.
Sure.
And with that, how can we move forward with that in the future?
As I said earlier, that with Juba is still a coming up city, so we could have zoning done in areas where we will have the so-called VIP live this side, and then we have a land that can be shared by all of us through having apartments, through having shared facilities, and this can reduce congestion, traffic, jam, and even the issues of crimes, because living in a zone where your neighbor is living a luxurious life and then you cannot even have a lunch, you begin to have that evil mind of, okay, can I attack this person? Can I go and rob and those kind of things? So looking at that, this is very important to be considered when we are we are having when we are planning for our cities. And then the other thing that we need to look at is the other thing that we need to look at is sanitation. You know, without sanitation, there are a lot of things that can come up. Even in old cities, the issues of sanitation always comes up. But once it is well planned in such a way that we leave a space where for instance, the sewage system is passing, nobody builds there. So in case one of these pipe breaks up, it will be easier for us to do repairs. But then if we construct everywhere, when the pipe breaks up, it means you have to break in the neighborhood, and a lot of things come up. So those are some of the technical considerations that we can do with our cities in South Sudan, which are not yet well built. We can take advantage and do this during our planning. And maybe like some of us who are in those planning teams, you can share with the authorities, the implementers of the policies, to consider some of these things. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. And that would bring our question into the idea of space planning and how that can affect how these spaces would interact. And my next question would be to Engineer Ayaba. And the question is that, why is it important to consider architecture as an important factor when developing building structures, communities, and social reform within the framework of South Sudan? You're muted. Sorry, we can't hear you. Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Architecture is the foundation and the finishes of a beautiful buildings. So for us to have architecture in the construction industry is very, very important. Like, we cannot survive without architecture. So architecture is more than just a shelter. It influences the physical and mental well-being and can be used also as an venue for community development and health through capacity building, areas relating to construction provision of communal facilities, and improvement of lifestyle. So architecture is the brain behind all the construction, and architecture work hand in hand with urban planners to come and develop, because now when you're developing, you will need to come back to the drawing board and start thinking, like they're bringing the vision. They pick the image of a client into a pictorial form. So they bring all the vision through interviews, through their own creativity, and they bring it into pictorial form, whereby now the structural engineers or other engineers, electrical engineers, they can develop in, because the structural engineer cannot go ahead and do the framing without a structure. So from the beginning, why I call it as a foundation, because they are the first engineers, they are the first architects that can come into a place and they provide us with the plans. Then there, the civil engineers take over. Once the building has already stand in place, the structure also comes to check on the finishes, that is artistic impression. So you just don't want to put something like a box like this and then you go away, no. And the strategic area where you want this building to be, its location. Architecture like has a full connection with the community. It's more of connectivity and community that unites the building and the people, because you're building for the people. So you have to put in mind that the connectivity and the community as one. So that's why architecture is very important. Without architecture, civil engineers can just build for us boxes. So architecture is very important in any industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayaba. And you've definitely stated clearly that there need to be a information flow between different sectors within this built environment, and that one aspect would affect the other. And there's an important thought of always having to think of what the other person would need instead of considering your own needs first. With that being said, I would like to ask Engineer Mariam about, in terms of sustainability, what are some of the sustainability practices that South Sudan has undertaken to encourage such spaces of green spaces, or spaces that we can all come as one in?
Thank you, Josephine. So as mentioned earlier, green spaces are public and private open spaces in urban cities covered by vegetation, which is directly or indirectly available for users. And this can include street trees, garden and parks. South Sudan, we already have some parks. We have the Boma National Park, I think the Nimule Park, I think there's one more, I can't remember right now, and which have a wealth of wildlife. So these, in future, we can use these to open up many opportunities for wildlife viewing, bird watching, other outdoor activities. And so it can tie to getting tourism or tourists to come and view that and contribute to our economy as well. Also, we have high quality soils, especially actually all around. It's just different. I know if we go to former unity states, we have like the loam, the black clay loam soil, and it's good for like planting maize and stuff. And Eastern Equatoria as well as Western and Central. So these high quality soils hold water and supply plants with proper nutrients. So we can use it to plant more trees, more vegetation. And as Sarah mentioned earlier on, it is very sad about the cutting of trees to install electric poles. So we need to plant more trees, especially street trees. And because it is estimated that an urban tree is 15 times more useful than a rural tree, because in addition to absorbing equal amount of carbon dioxide, it can be used to shade and cool buildings, and thus reduce the need for energy for cooling the buildings. So the presence and distribution of urban greenery, including parks, trees, shrubs, grass, all that can be used to influence the microclimate of the city. As I mentioned earlier on, with climate change, we expect it to be more hot, hotter than before. And so the trees will shelter the ground from the solar radiation by providing the shade for both streets and housing. In addition, water has a general cooling effect. So evaporation from the trees, or even if we add more blue spaces, which are like artificial rivers or lakes, small ponds, they can have a general cooling effect on the surrounding atmosphere. I know for a fact in Juba, like the title deeds has a page where it is indicated that the owner has to plant a tree in the plot. However, while I was there, there's no follow-up on the implementation, which ties back on my point on the need for supporting policies. And I would also want to mention about the roads. I think Patricia, Sarah, they've mentioned about roads, but yes, we have few paved roads, which provides the opportunity to pave upcoming urban roads using new resilient materials that can reflect heat and are more durable than asphalt. So we can replace the concrete and asphalt with porous materials, for example, like mulch and native vegetation. We can also use green roofs. Currently, like in other countries, like the US, for example, most buildings have green roofs, which are just roofing systems that are designed to have plants and vegetations growing on their surface, which can potentially be used to lower the ambient temperatures. So this is something that South Sudan can look into. And we have to make sure that when we are using non-porous surfaces, like what we have now in like the paved roads, we have to make sure they're away from water bodies, because then to avoid this surface runoff, and we also need to install drainages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, I would agree with that. There's an important factor of having to design passively in a way that we're using the resources that we have in order to almost sustain, in order to protect, and in order to almost help us push our urban development forward. Speaking about having vast resources, I just wanted to know about how this idea of a heritage site, a site maybe could be a forest, a large greenery forest that could be protected or so. This question will go to Engineer Abolo. And the question is that in urban planning, how can heritage site be conserved or almost be like isolated, but at the same time people could use it freely?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question, Sarah. Josephine, I'm sorry. So, first of all, we need, in South Sudan, I'm not sure how many urban sites we have other than the national parks, and then there's the John Garang Mausoleum in Juba. So urban sites, the way I've seen it here, they isolated them so much from the residents to a point where it's gated and nobody goes in there. One thing we need as citizens to remember, so one thing we need as citizens to remember that urban sites are actually our assets. We should be very proud of them. People need to be sensitized how we can how we can protect them and conserve them, but without isolating them from people. People need sensitization because they see things, and it's heavily guarded, and then they get scared of them, but they shouldn't get scared of them. They should actually allow people to have entrance fees in there in a way to generate revenue as a tourist attraction points, for example. I know in Germany and in Rome, there are so many heritage sites, but they are accessible to the public. However, they are also protected by the public. So the residents were sensitized on the importance of these monuments, for example, or the specific heritage sites. So they know what they mean to the society. And little kids from school need to have access to them because it's part of our history. So they have to get in there, have school tours. The gate should be open to people. And then in turn, you can have just along, on the sides or in the nearby areas, you can have small kiosks where everything South Sudan can be displayed. So when the tourists come to see such sites, then they also get to be exposed to our culture, to our food, and things like that. So when people start seeing value in those things, in that aspect, they themselves will protect it. So they will help the law enforcement or the police or the guards to protect these monuments or to protect these sites, because they are important not only for us, but also in generation of some revenue. So in my opinion, they shouldn't be isolated from the public. They should allow time for public to have access, just have a bit of entrance fee, and then give people a bit of sensitization on how important they are. Yeah, and then you can have the public protecting them, but as well as gaining from it as well.
That's great. Thank you very much. One thing about being urban designers is that we design for the future, yet we also have to keep in mind about what could go wrong. And that question I would like to ask is for engineering Mariam, and the question is about how do we design within the framework of, let's say, for example, flooding within South Sudan.
Okay. I talked briefly earlier on about flood warning system. So first of all, it is important to have a flood warning system. So most countries are able to track, like for example, in the US, they even track the hurricanes. So they know in 2 days or in whatever, in 3 days, in 1 week, we'll have a hurricane coming. So these are things we can implement, having a climate monitoring system. So to be able to know when a flood is occurring, and then be able to prepare by letting the people know, should they evacuate or what to do next, right? But also in terms of prevention, we can construct dikes and river dams just to protect against along River Nile, because looking at the past floods that has been happening in South Sudan, it's mostly because of the overflow of River Nile. And so we can construct these dams, river dams, for flood protection measures. And then I insist on awareness. People have to be informed. They have to know when this happens, what to do next. So the government have to address this by continuously updating the civilians on these measures to take when it happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And coming into next question of preparing for things that might go wrong, I would like to ask Engineer Ayaba, and the question is about, recently there's been a stadium in Juba that has collapsed. What do you think has happened, and how can the health and safety of such procedures can be maintained within our constructions within South Sudan?
Thank you very much for that. At this stage, it's quite difficult to judge without clear understanding the facts on the site for this particular case, because structural failures are bound to happen when engineering and structural construction safety combined together with the architectural set standards, procedures, scope, specifications are improperly adhered to. So I will not go deep to this particular case, since the investigating team will give a decision on their actual findings. However, I can give you possibilities of why the building has collapsed, because in structures, when a scenario happens that a structure has collapsed, we have to go and investigate what is the reason for that. And it starts right from design. We go back and review the design. So sometimes it could fail because of poor design. They might have designed it using not following the standards, or we don't have South Sudanese set standards because we are still using other standards, maybe the British standards, the European standards, American standards. So maybe you may find that what is applied in those countries is not the same as what is applied here, because here now we have a strong hot weather. So we need to, the materials we are going to use for construction and the way of design, we have to design in such a way that it is resistant to the temperature. So sometime when a structure collapses, it used to go back to the standard. Did you apply it well? If the answer is yes, everything has gone well, then we go and check on the construction method. Sometimes it's poor construction method. You find that contractors, normally they use shortcuts. They use shortcuts for very many reasons. One, maybe the client has contributed to that. The client is not paying them money, and you want something standard. If you want something standard, you have to pay for the money. So if the money is not there, they are forced to use the available material they have to do it. But that one, I call it unprofessional, because if a client is not paying for it, you better say no than going ahead and produce substandard work. So that is part of the technical part. According to the picture that I saw, which was circulating about that very case, the reinforcements are kind of collapsed, just all of a sudden collapsed, and that case could be poor formwork. you find that the formwork they did not might because I was not there. Maybe they have not support them properly. They have not braces them because they're standard, and this formwork have to be designed by specialists, not just a carpenter can do that work. So you may find that they are not prompt properly. So on that process, when you're trying to load in the concrete, it is too much. The load could not load it, so it causes that abrupt sagging, and therefore it deflects and the concrete all goes off. So another factor could be the managerial lack of supervision. So if construction is going on at 100% time, the site engineer has to be there, because the site engineer understands everything from design into the construction. Sometimes the workforce at site, they do they execute the work like not because they want it that, but because they don't know. So if they have no one, because construction anyone can do, it just need guidance. So if the engineer is not there to guide this person right, and he's tired, what would he do? He just do anything that he wants. So he needs proper supervision on that. And then it also needs consultants firm. For something big like this, it cannot go without consultancy, because consultants, they help to manage the project. So all the time when you submit in some drawings for review, it goes between the A&E, that is the structure and the engineering team, and then again comes back to the consultant. So each time, even if you find out that just how we have sub drawings, if you find out that the design, what was designed, is different from what is being put down, that's what we call the as-built. So you find that during the process, it happened because there's some factors. Maybe you're trying to put this building here, you met a tree, which before you did not see it. So you have to come back and consult, how do we do this, how do we do that? So that consultant's firm has to be there right from the beginning until the end. So those could be some of the factors, but it might not happen all of it, but it might be one of them. So for this case, I can say let's wait for the investigation team to come up and analyze the exact reason, but I'm sure it's one of that reason. So
thank you very much for that. And you did mention that they always need to be an authorial power that looks before, and that needs to make sure that there's procedures of health and safety, that there's how things have been drawn are put according to how it's been said, and that would possibly be linked to the lack of regulations that is put in place.
Of course, safety is very important in construction. Actually, if I'm the engineer, I will not approve the building without safety measures. First of all, you have to provide safety procedures and safety measures. You have to show me how you're going to manage your safety. And from safety procedures, I would say that you have to first provide the first aid kits, just in case one of the workers have got injured. How do you help them? It's your responsibility. Just so I say, as an engineer, your responsibility is to make everyone happy. If you're trying to construct any project at all, or any building, or any road, and people around it are not happy, then you have to go back and revise your way. So one of it is that you have to put the first aid, because you may find that this is a person who is so much into the reinforcement and he's injured. So you have to put that on. And now that you have COVID-19 in process, so in construction, you have to make sure that you put water station in every corner, at least, not only one, so that these workforce, each time they'll go and wash their hand, you make sure they're putting their mask. You make sure they keep like at least 6 feet away from each other where they can. If they cannot, let them put the mask. And because it's too hot in Juba, they sweat. So let them keep on changing this mask all the time, because their health is also your responsibility as an engineer. Also, you have to make sure that the construction site is always clean. All unwanted material, make sure you take out, because these are the things that causes accident. You find that someone's going up there and the construction place is messy, he just slides, there's hammer going on, everything. So you have to also practice, that is, you have to make sure they put on their PPE. That is the personal protective equipment. You have to make sure they have their gumboot, they have their reflectors, they have their helmets, whatever, the gloves, wherever they're engaged into. Then you have to use barricades. Like, for example, barricades and hoardings, very important, because if you're constructing here and people are passing outside, it's your responsibility as well to make sure that people who are outside are not hurt. So you have to put some barricades and warning signs saying that, hey, construction is going on, please don't bypass here. And then you have to make sure that the safety manager is always there all the time. Sometimes construction can take like 8 hours to 10 hours. So you make sure that the safety man is always there. And how do you make sure that they maintain that safety? Even if you're not there, you have to make sure you train them. Every morning, you conduct training for them. And then you can, like, for example, pick just what we call the alcohol test, the BA percentage. That is the blood content, percentage of blood alcohol content. So you make sure every morning you just pick random. You say, you come here, you test. If you find that there's level of alcohol is at least more than 2, you just send this person to go home, because he's not focused. He's not focused at all when it comes to safety, because we want, like, when something just did like this, pop, you must react and immediately go away. But if you're not reacting, you're just doing like this, you're just endangering yourself, and it's bringing a lot of problem in this construction time. So also, you have to make sure that they are disciplined. And this discipline is that if I caught you today, you've taken alcohol, so I have to give you verbal warning. And this verbal warning, I have to use like 3 months for monitoring you, or whatever standard, depending on the duration of the construction. After that, you do written warning, suspension, immediate termination. Because sometimes also you don't need to terminate them. They are learning, because if you terminate them, why would they learn? So you have to give them room for improvement as well. Then you have to perform drill. By drill, it's like an act. There's a crane trying to lift maybe concrete to the high risers, something like this, and then you feel like someone is falling from up. So you act. Someone, and then to test how these people will react, and then you give them first aid. It's part of the training. So by all giving them this training, and you make sure you avoid them talking on phone or in the workplace. So all these things, psychological approach, by that it will help you maintain the safety measures on construction site, and you'll have a better construction, and a project comes to an end successfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Ayaba. And I'd just like to move into our final questions and recommendations. And Engineer Labina, I'd just like to know that with COVID happening, how will this be an impact in the future of urban planning? And your recommendation would be appreciated after that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for that question. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that ensuring a healthy population, it requires reshaping society, and cities is where that process starts. Globally, the pandemic has had a heavy impact on urbanism and urbanization. More people are preferring to use private cars. There are less travels. Working from home is now a norm. Green spaces have been more occupied during lockdowns. People are improving on their buildings by ensuring that there is proper and adequate ventilation. But in South Sudan, the COVID-19 pandemic, in my view, has had very little effect. It has been business as usual. There's been lockdowns, there have been curfews, but all these people have not been complying to them. But if anything, actually the COVID-19 has exposed a lot of gaps that need addressing, and has also presented opportunities for us to think smarter, for us to think sustainability when planning for the future. One thing, densification, which is a term used by planners to determine the number of people living in a certain area. It's a precondition for effective urban service provision. knowing the number of people in a certain area or the housing units in a certain area, it eases planning and it creates fair and equitable access to core services. There is, however, a lack of core services like WASH, like healthcare, which has made response to COVID-19 very challenging, and also guidelines like hand washing, very impossible to comply with. Perhaps we can take some lessons from previous outbreaks that have taken place in the world, like the London cholera outbreak in the mid-19th century, which led to the creation of the city's sewer system with a network of many underground drains. So we could use that as a lesson, because I mean, we in South Sudan, we've had a lot of outbreaks, and now we are battling with a pandemic. And in addition, population density without affordable housing is a problem. People who can't build are obviously forced to go and rent. And if it's expensive, they will consider to go for squatter houses, which in turn can easily turn an area into a slum. And we don't want to really have slums within an urban setting. It makes the aesthetic of the city very unappealing. So future planning should improve access to affordable housing with proper ventilation, introduce rental rates and management of housing by type, by status, and by zone, as Engineer Sarah mentioned. So all of this to avoid the condition of urban sprawl, you know. But also worldwide, one of the few places that I've actually seen a surge in human traffic during the lockdowns has been the urban parks, as Engineer Miriam mentioned. So in South Sudan, these places actually existed in plans, but they are now plots of land to individuals. So future planning should consider open spaces, should consider watersheds, forests, parks into the heart of how we think and plan about a city to support better health, better water management, and also climate adaptation. And finally, the necessity of social distancing in responding to COVID-19 is also reshaping urban transport. In Netherlands, in the 70s, the social and economic crisis actually started the bike revolution. And the COVID-19 pandemic now, it is now acting as a flywheel, you know, for sustainable mobility. In Juba currently, more people are now using bikes to go to work. Many people are using public transportation, but as well as private cars. They are increasing in numbers. People are taking on physical exercises like jogging along the streets. So this tells us that future urban planning should actually consider effective mobility systems through careful consideration of the relationship between land use and transport infrastructure.
Thank you very much for this informative information. I'd like to move by asking Sarah Abidja for your recommendation and just a brief question that we probably haven't asked you yet. What challenges do electrical engineers face in South Sudan, and what's your recommendation moving forward with that?
Thank you so much. Actually, the profound challenges that are faced by electrical engineers in South Sudan are several, but to mention a few, we have the issues of one, we don't have association of electrical engineers in South Sudan that can act as an advisory board for everything that includes or that concerns with electrical planning, designing, and all that. Two, there is the issue of using of not well-trained technicians to do wiring. Anyone can just do wiring of the house without a wiring certificate. Then they will install the power. That has been very common in South Sudan, and we don't have a body that comes and tests the house before the installation of the electricity in the house. The other is electricity in South Sudan is very, very expensive. If you want to connect the Juba power in your house, you have to have $2,500 US dollars if it is one pole away from the main supply lane. But if you have 2 to 3 poles, you have to pay 4,000 to 6,000 USD for you to have power, the public power. So this is close to impossible for the urban poor to have power, even though we are now having power in Juba. I once tried to apply for power, and I was given a bill of 7,000. I ended USD. I ended up buying solar because it was too expensive. And the other thing is lack of enforcement of regulations. So you find that anyone can just put a generator anywhere, and then they make all the noise, they install, even the generator feeding the house will come with a naked wire without having a conduit or even using a well-insulated cable. So you find that even you can be shocked when it rains because the wires that are being used are not meant for transporting, conveying power from the generator to the next house. So those are some of the things. And the space for the poles is actually one very important issue that the government needs to act on. You find that the poles are being planted just next to the house nearby or next to the shop. So in case of any short circuit or this pole falls down, it means that there will be very minimal safety for anybody living around there. I've also realized that in Juba, the step down and step up transformers are being planted in the areas where people live. So these transformers, either step up or step down transformers, need to be protected. They are not in other places. A burglar proof is put around them, but ours is left open. So when it bursts, in case it's not well serviced, it means the whole area will be damaged, and then people will lose property or even life. So that is one of the things that the government has to enforce to this Juba electricity distribution company to begin putting those protections around the transformers. The other thing I realized is women. It is very close to impossible for a woman to get a job in a electrical industry in South Sudan. I once applied in one of the ministries. I was told, no, this girl cannot manage. Recently, I tried with the Juba electrical power. They said this work is only for men. And then the other thing also, the people they are using to wire these were ex-convicts who were in the prison, and they were trained just for a short time when they were in the prison, and they are the ones now who are connecting power. That's why you see we have those burnings of the transformers. One was in Miosaba, the other one was in Muluki, another one was somewhere. So those are some of the issues that we need to look at. Let's not try to reduce the expense of installation by using unprofessional technicians just to try to reduce the payment. The other thing is we need to sensitize the communities not to build very close to the road. Leave space for these poles, because in planning there's need to have a space where the electric poles will pass and all that. So communities also need to be sensitized. And the other thing is enforcement of testing the houses or any installation. It should be tested to avoid destruction. And then the government needs to invest in electricity to make it cheaper, because now we have a private public partnership with companies that are providing the electricity, and they charge citizens a lot of money. So you find that the government is not putting anything, so all these charges are going to citizens, and citizens are not able to afford this. And we are looking at having clean energy. Let's stop cutting the trees. Let's look. So this one cannot work. So these are some of the things that I needed to talk about. And then the other very important thing is we need to reinstall the street lights and the traffic lights that were vandalized, because this is a source of safety for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Sarah. And I'd just like to move to Mariam. Briefly, would also want to know that what challenges do chemical or process engineers face in South Sudan, and your recommendation moving forward?
Thank you. Sarah has mentioned a lot, especially to do with like employment opportunities, especially for women. In 2017, the only brewery which was there was shut down due to economic instability. And right now, I think chemical engineers are limited to the oil industry and some of the NGOs. And this gives little avenue for chemical engineers to put their knowledge and skills into practice. We need more manufacturing industries, but also within the oil industry, for example, more has to be done to include chemical engineers. For example, the current oil pollution in Paloch, we need chemical engineers to make oil recovery safer, more environmental friendly. And so, as Sarah mentioned, there's a need for the chemical engineers to form an association to be able to advocate for inclusion into addressing some of these issues on a much larger platform. And one thing I would like to mention in terms of gender inclusivity as well, there are very few women chemical engineers, and I think we need to start investing more into STEM trainings, both in primary schools and high schools, to increase girl interests in the sciences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a strong way to move forward, is implementing these in schools to spread awareness. And I'd just like to move briefly to Abolo Irene, and the question is, within your field, what are the roles that women in these are involved in implying this, like, energy efficiency?
All right, thank you, Josephine. So first of all, we need to understand what energy efficiency is. So energy efficiency is the use or the minimized use of energy to do the same tasks. So you reduce the use of energy, but without altering the quality of the work or the task you intend to do. So energy efficiency can be in buildings, it can be in our technologies, the various technologies, either cooking or water treatment, or in the various sectors in our daily lives. So if you look at the main contributor of climate change, the main contributor of greenhouse gases emissions, most of our greenhouse gases emissions are from energy farms, energy production, energy consumption, and so on and so forth. Now, how does this relate to women? In the case of South Sudan, if you look at our different homes, our different houses, women are the ones who are always in the kitchen cooking. So that means they're the ones who are, they're the ones who are directly affected by this need for energy in our different homes. Now, what are the roles of women in implementing energy efficiency? Since climate change is one of the main issues right now, we need to minimize on usage of energy and save our environment. So the first thing women can do, which they have already been doing, is minimize or find efficient ways of cooking, which I have seen in several home states. They are looking for different charcoal stoves that don't use too much charcoal. So that, in a way, is already energy efficiency practice. So you're trying to minimize using too much charcoal or firewood in order to reduce cost, but also try to save our environment in a way. And then if you look at buildings, most of our buildings, I'm glad somebody earlier mentioned, I don't know if we have codes or in the country for energy efficiency, like different buildings must adhere to different energy efficiency codes. So as mothers or sisters in the house, we are the ones who are always controlling activities in the house. The men mostly take care of financing things, even though women do the same. So how can we minimize of excessive use of energy. So the first thing, as mothers or sisters, we need to see that if there's no one in the house, electricity should be put off, because you don't need it. If you're outside, you don't need lighting by itself inside. So you try to save your energy in that sense. And also usage of fan or air conditioning. Why must you leave it on the whole day when you're not even in the house to use it? And then you find some people having the AC on and the window is open. So that sort of exchange, it compels the excessive usage of energy, because to produce for the air conditioners to function, they consume a lot of power. So you try to minimize our usage of energy as much as possible, and women are the way forward into this implementation, because we are most directly impacted by certain activities in homes and cooking and so on and so forth. So that would be the role of women. Start from the houses, from the grassroots, transfer it to our little ones, and then from then on, it goes wider and wider. I think that's my opinion.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to conclude this discussion by thanking our panelists today. You've been informative. We've been inspired by you. We would love to see more of you in the future. And I'd also like to thank the UN Women for supporting the South Sudanese Women Intellectual Forum. And finally, I would also like to thank our audience today for tuning in. And until next time, thank you very much.